Jai Gurudev. So today we begin our reading of the Yoga Vasishta. The way this will work is someone will read a chapter or two, and then we will stop and take comments and questions about what we've read or about anything that we're doing here. So we'll begin by reading at the beginning of the book, and this is chapter 1, book 1. And I'll be reading today. Others will have opportunities to read as well as we proceed. As we're listening to the words of the Yoga Vasishta, these are translated into English from Sanskrit. Listening to the pure Sanskrit words is most beneficial, but this English translation is excellent and conveys the same kind of influence that the Sanskrit words would be conveying. And what that influence does is it balances karmic traces in the form of knowledge constructs that exist in the Manomaya kosha. Now, if we can take our awareness to the Manomaya kosha while we're listening to this and discussing this Vedic literature, it will have the greatest effect in balancing the karmic traces. So this is a laboratory, an exercise, basically like a meditation. We want to connect with the silent witness and maintain that connection while listening to the words. We want to be in a state of restful alertness, and we should have eyes open and follow the text in the video. The reason we want to do that is because it will help to hold the attention of the mind on the words. And it is the words and the way they're constructed and the sentence structure and the content that is effective in balancing the knowledge constructs that exist deep in the mind, in the unconscious mind. So we want to be sure we're contacting the unconscious mind, and we do this just by our intention. By our intention, we're witnessing from the silent witness and in contact with the unconscious mind while we're reading this text. We should have all judgment suspended. That means we're not critical of what's being said. The ego will want to say at times, "Oh, this is the most amazing statement." Or the ego will say, "This is completely out of place. Probably shouldn't be there. Might even be a mistake." Or the ego will say, "This is a waste of time. Why am I even listening to this? It's all just gibberish. Doesn't make much sense. And how does it apply to me achieving enlightenment?" Because remember, the ego only wants to do things from which it gains a profit. So we should suspend all of this, put the ego in the back part of the awareness, and all of our attention should be on the silent witness, and in that way we'll be listening without judgment. If we listen without judgment, attention on the silent witness, then the words will go deep into the unconscious mind, and they are constructed to be an antidote for faulty knowledge constructs that are not in alignment with the divine blueprint or the divine knowledge constructs that actually have created this universe and are creating it now and maintaining it and keeping it alive for us to live in. So we just suspend our judgment and our criticism and our amazement and just be innocent, listening and watching, witnessing what's going on. Okay, so remind ourselves each time that we begin, this is the way we should be thinking. And that will give us the best benefit, because the reason we're doing this is to achieve enlightenment, moksha. And if we can perform this meditation. It's a meditation with eyes open and listening to text. Very special kind of meditation. If we can perform this meditation perfectly, knowledge constructs will be balanced that are keeping us from liberation, freedom. Okay, let's begin. This is Book 1, Chapter 1, Introduction. Sutikshna and Agastya, Karuna and Agnivesha, Suruchi and Divine Messenger, King Arishtanimi, Indra and Valmiki. Hail the Eternal. Om. Salutation to that reality from whom all beings proceed, by whom they are manifest, upon whom they depend, and in whom they become extinct. He is the knower, the knowledge, and all that is to be known. He is the seer, the act of seeing, and all that is to be seen. He is the actor, the cause, and the effect. Therefore, salutation to He who is all knowledge Himself. Salutation to He who is supreme bliss itself, from whom flow the dews of delight, both in heaven and earth, and who is the life of all. One Sukatishna, a Brahman, whose mind was full of questions, went to the hermitage of Agastya and respectfully asked the sage, "O great sage, you are informed in all the ways and truths of virtue, and know all scriptures with certainty. I am in a great doubt, and I pray you will kindly remove it. Tell me, in your opinion, whether liberation results from a man's acts, or his knowledge, or both." Agastya replied, "As the birds fly in the air with both wings, so the highest state of emancipation is attained through both knowledge and acts. Neither our acts nor knowledge alone produces liberation, but both together are the means. I will recite to you an example from old traditions, a story of a Brahman named Karunya, who was learned in the Vedas in the days of old. He was the son of Agnivesha and accomplished in the Vedas and all their branches. After finishing his studies with his teacher, he returned to his own home. He remained a skeptic at home, reluctant and impassive to do anything. When his father, Agnivesha, saw his son so slack in his duties, he upbraided him for his good. Agnivesha said, "My son, why do you not discharge your duties? Why are you not observing the daily rituals and the injunctions of the Holy Scriptures? Tell me, how can you succeed in anything if you remain inactive? How can you attain salvation? Tell me why you're not doing anything." Karunya replied, "The offering of daily oblations and performance of morning and evening devotions during life are inculcated in the Veda and law as the active duties. But it is neither by acts or riches, nor by means of children, that one attains his liberation. It is solely by self-denial that the great souls taste the ambrosia of emancipation. Tell me, my father, which of these rules am I to observe? Doubtful of this, I have become indifferent to acts." Agnivesha said, "Hear me, my son." After so saying, Karunya held his silence. His father, seeing him quiet, continued speaking. "My son, let me tell you a story. When you have fully considered its meaning, you may do as you like." Agnivesha speaking. There was a lady named Suruchi, the best of Apsara nymphs, who was seated on the mountain peak of Himalaya, surrounded by peacocks. Here, Kinnaras inflamed by love sported with their mates, and the fall of heavenly streams, Ganga and Yamuna, served to cleanse the gravest sins of men. She saw a messenger of Indra making his way through the sky. Then Suruchi, this most fortunate and best of Apsaras, addressed the messenger. Suruchi said, "O you messenger of gods, kindly tell me kindly from where you come and what place are you going at present?" The divine messenger replied, "Well, you have asked, O pretty proud maid, and I will tell you all as it is. The royal sage, King Arishthanini, has given his realm to his son, and with religious indifference to the world, has set out to the forest to practice asceticism. He is performing his austerities on the Gandhamandana mountains. I am now coming from there after discharge of my errand and returning to Indra's palace to report the matter." Suruchi said, "Tell me, my lord, what has taken place here? I am humbly very curious. You should not cause me the pain of anxiety." The messenger replied, "Hear me, O gentle maid, I will describe everything as it has occurred. On hearing that the king was practicing the utmost rigors of asceticism in that forest, Indra, the Lord of gods, asked me to take this heavenly car and proceed at once to the spot. Take this car, said Indra, bearing the Apsaras equipped with all their musical instruments and furnished with a band of Gandharvas, Siddha spiritual masters, Yakshas, and Kinnaras. Convey them, said Indra, with all their string instruments, flutes and drums, to the woodland mount of Gandandamandana. There, having placed King Arishtanimi in the car, bring him to the enjoyment of heavenly delight in this city of Amaravati, the seat of immortals. The messenger added, receiving this instruction from Indra and taking his car with all its equipment, I proceeded to that mountain. Having arrived at the mountain and advanced to the king's hermitage, I delivered the orders of the great Indra to him. Hearing my words, O happy lady, King Arishtanimi reluctantly spoke to me, saying, I wish to ask you something, O messenger, which I hope you will answer. Tell me what good and what evil are in heaven, so that I may decide whether I want to settle here. I answered, saying, in heaven there is ample reward for merit, conferring perfect bliss to all. But it is the degree of merit that leads one to higher heavens. By moderate virtue, one is certainly entitled to a middle station. Virtue of an inferior order leads a person to a lower position, but one's virtue is destroyed by impatience at the excellence of his betters, by haughtiness of his equals, and by joy at the inferiority of others. When one's virtue is thus destroyed, he must enter the abode of mortals. These and the like are the effects of good and evil in heaven. Hearing this, O good maiden, King Arishtanimi answered, O divine messenger, I do not like heaven that has such conditions. Henceforth, I will practice the most austere form of asceticism and abandon this my unhallowed human frame in the same way as a snake abandons his time-worn skin. Be pleased, O messenger of the gods, to return with your heavenly car to the presence of the great Indra, from where you came. Travel in good fortune. The celestial messenger resumed. Thus being bid, I went, O good lady, to the presence of Indra. When I reported the matter, Indra was struck with great wonder. Then the great Indra again spoke to me with a sweet voice, saying, my messenger, go again to that king and take him to the hermitage of Valmiki. Valmiki is well acquainted with every truth. Tell him my errand, which is to instruct the dispassionate king, saying, O great sage, plead with this king, who is humble and dispassionate and dislikes the enjoyments of heaven, so that this king, who is aggrieved at the miseries of the world, may gradually come to attain his liberation. went and explained my mission to the royal hermitage. Then took him to sage Valmiki. I delivered great Indra's charge so that the king may practice for his final liberation. Sage Valmiki welcomed the king with gentle inquiries regarding his welfare. The king replied, "O great sage, you are informed in all the truths of religion. You are the greatest of those who know the knowable. The very sight of you has given me all that I desire, and therein is all my welfare. Great sage, I wish to learn from you how I may escape the miseries that arise from one's connection with this world. I hope you will reveal this to me without reserve." Valmiki said, "Hear me, O king. I will relate the entire Ramayana to you. By hearing and understanding, you will be saved, even while in this life. O great and intelligent king, listen as I repeat the sacred conversation that took place between Rama and Vasishta, relating the way of liberation, which I well know from my own knowledge." The king replied, "O best of sages, tell me precisely who and what this Rama was, and what was his bondage, and how did he become free of it?" Valmiki said, "Vishnu was cursed to take the form of a prince with an assumed ignorance, like that of men of little understanding." The king said, "Who was the author of that curse, and how could it befall Rama, who was the personification of consciousness and joy and the very image of wisdom?" Valmiki replied, "Sanat Kumara, who was devoid of desires, had been residing at the abode of Brahma, to which Vishnu, the Lord of the three worlds, was a visitor from Vaikuntha. The Lord God Vishnu was welcomed by all the inhabitants of the Brahmaloka, as well as by Brahma himself, except by Sanat Kumara. The god Vishnu addressed Sanat Kumara. Sanat Kumara, it is ignorance that makes you forsake your desires for fear of rebirth. Therefore you must be born under the name of Sarajanma to be troubled with desires." In return, Sanat Kumara denounced Vishnu by saying, "Even as all the discerning as you are, you shall have to sacrifice your omniscience for some time and live as an ignorant mortal." There was another curse pronounced upon Vishnu by the sage Bhrigu, who, seeing his wife killed by Vishnu, became incensed with anger and said, "Vishnu, you shall have also to be deprived of your wife." Vishnu was again cursed by Vrinda to be deprived of his wife on account of his beguiling her in the form of her husband. Again, when the pregnant wife of Devadatta was killed from fear on seeing the man-lion form of Vishnu, Narasimha. The iconic Vishnu was denounced by the husband who was sorely afflicted by the loss of his wife. Thus cursed by Bhrigu, Sanat Kumara Devadatta, and Vrinda. Vishnu was obliged to be born on this earth in the figure of a human being. I have explained to you the causes of all the curses passed on Vishnu. Now I will tell you other things, and you will have to listen carefully. And so ends chapter 1. So let's think about this a moment and see, do we have first? Does anyone have any questions about what we just read here? If you're muted, you'll want to unmute yourself to speak. So this begins with Hail the Eternal. So that's pretty profound, actually, if we think about it. When we say Hail the Eternal, what do we mean? We're greeting that which is our own self. And then there's a little description of this eternal. Salutation to that reality from whom all beings proceed. All beings, it says. Interesting. So all beings arise from one reality. One being is the source of all beings. This one being is the knower and the knowledge of all that is to be known. He is the seer, the act of seeing, and all that is to be seen. So this is a perfect description of what? The silent witness. So the eternal is the silent witness. This is what we connect with in our own inner consciousness. This being is the actor in the cause and the effect. So what's being described here is literally a being that is imagining everything, imagining other beings, imagining activities, imagining scenery. And that being is remaining established in its own bliss while having this grand session of imagination. So this is exactly the description of a lucid dream. So when we're engaging in a lucid dream, this is why we see this as such an important experience in our life to cultivate. We are much more deeply connected to who we are than when we're acting in our normal waking state as we are now. So the eternal, this is who you are. You are that eternal being, the source of everything. So then we go into this concept of telling a story. We'll find that this is a common theme throughout. Quite often we're told stories, and why are we told these stories? Because it is a way to engage the ego. The ego is a great storyteller. right? Isn't that all the ego does all day long? Tells stories. I live here, I am this person, I've had these experiences. I've gone here, I've done this, I've met this person. This person was not nice to me, this person is very nice to me. The ego is full of stories. Our memories are stories in our own mind. And the ego loves to replay those stories and make up new stories. What if this happened? What if I went here? What if that person didn't give me what I need? The ego is constantly telling stories in the mind. And these stories, where do they arise? From karmic traces. And where karmic traces arise? They're like recordings of things that we have done in past lives or even in this life. But mostly in past lives, karmic traces are little recordings. They're kind of like in the old, very old analog days of music and voice recording. Recordings were literally scratches on a piece of plastic vinyl. And whenever a needle passes through these scratches, it reproduces what was recorded there. That's what a karmic trace is, like a little rut that exists in the awareness. And when attention passes through this little rut in our awareness, it tickles the sides and it causes that story that is revealed to come forth from this karmic trace. When we're meditating, here comes some idea, some thought, just out of left field. We didn't even have any idea we were going to think such a thing. It has arisen because some karmic trace has been touched by our awareness. Our awareness is like the needle on the old phonograph player. So to engage the ego is important, because when we engage the ego properly in this way, we are touching these karmic traces that the ego is made of. The ego does not exist without this collection of karmic traces. The ego is literally an emergence event of individual karmic traces. One karmic trace by itself does not make the ego, but all of the karmic traces together, humming and playing their stories out, all of these karmic traces together create the ego. Some karmic traces express themselves in physical characteristics and personality traits and the way we look and the color of our eyes. But all of these karmic traces taken together create a wholeness that is greater than any one karmic trace or the sum of the karmic traces. That's what an emergence is. It's a wholeness that arises that's greater than the sum of the parts. And this wholeness that arises from individual karmic traces, which are records of things that are in conflict with the divine will of the Creator. See, that's how a karmic trace is created in the first place. It is something that we did at some point in all of our eons of existence that was against or in opposition to or not supporting of the divine plan for the universe. The universe is created with a set of intentions or sutras. These are the syllables of the Rig Veda. These are the divine karmic traces. The syllables of the Rig Veda are the divine karmic traces in their most fundamental format. And when someone applies the technique of sanyama on each of these syllables with an imagination of what that syllable represents, the result is a colossal lucid dream that we call our universe, complete with trees and rivers and the moon and gravel on the ground and rocks and grass and people all arise from sanyama on the 432,000 syllables of the 10 mandalas of the Rig Veda. So that's pretty amazing. It's like having the formula of the entire universe distilled into these individual sutras. So when the Creator remembers these 432,000 syllables, he has a waking induced lucid dream that is the universe. And ultimately you and I are here in this dream as dream creatures, striving to reconnect back to that source. Where did this universe arise? Who is the Creator? What is my connection with that Creator? That is the journey of self-realization. So that's why we have these stories. It connects the ego to individual karmic traces, which are knowledge constructs, ideas of the way things really are. But now we know, because these are karmic traces, they are not the way things really are. They are not the divine blueprint, the divine thoughts that created the universe, but they are thoughts that are in opposition to the thoughts that created the universe. So these thoughts are pure ignorance, pure lack of truth. Now, when these knowledge constructs have been balanced, then it's like the awareness is purified. And we see this colossal dream of the world in its correct form. We understand exactly how the dream is being generated in the mind of the Creator. Here we have a lot of reference to Indra. Indra is literally the collective consciousness of the devas in the celestial realms. The Indra in the celestial realms is comparable to the deva of your body in the physical realm, which is the collective consciousness of all the cells, all the devas, and the intelligences of every cell in your body. And we know from our work with the deva of the body that here is a being that has personality and knowledge. Its knowledge is perfect when it is in regard to the physical body and the energy body, the pranamaya kosha. It knows these two bodies quite well because it is literally made of these two bodies. Every cell in these two bodies, every cell in the physical body, and every energy pattern in the pranamaya kosha is enlivened or made live by a deva. Devas are sparks of creative intelligence. And so the deva of the body is the Indra of all the devas of the body. Just like Indra is the name Indra is that collective consciousness of all the devas in the celestial realms. And that Indra then is operating in such a way at this time as to help embodied beings, human beings, to achieve enlightenment. This is the agenda of the beings in the celestial realm. This is what they do all day. And these beings, who are they? They are individuals, human beings like you and I, who in their last lifetime achieved moksha, at least moksha level 1. And that is the ticket out of physical human life on earth. When one achieves a moksha level 1 or any other higher level of moksha, then one transitions into the 5th dimension. The 5th dimension is the lower celestial realm. And from there, service continues. Service is an act of doing something for another. And what are they doing for another? They are helping those who have less knowledge and information, a greater load of individual karmic traces, wake up from their entrapment in these karmic traces in the human physical realm and achieve enlightenment. This is the agenda of the beings in the celestial realm. So that's why we're going to be hearing a lot of stories in the Vasishta. All right, our time is running to an end. Any questions, anything anyone wants to bring up? We have only a few seconds and then we'll close for today. All right, so thank you all for attending. We're closed for today. Tomorrow we'll continue with the second chapter, Reason for Writing the Reminder. Jai Gurudev.